Spread the fire. Welcome back to SMWX, and today I have something extremely special for you. I'd go so far as to say this is probably the most excited I've been for an SMWX episode because we have SMWX fam, a panel of SMWX subscribers. You'll remember on the WhatsApp channel, we sent out a call. We said, do you want to be in the next SMWX episode? And these loyal subscribers, these incredible people who are just examples of everything that's good about anyone in this country, have joined our panel today. And we're extremely, extremely excited to have them. There's no one cooler in the world than an SMWX subscriber. So shout out to all of you for joining us. It's really great to have you. And we are going to kick off by just asking this panel of subscribers to introduce themselves and say how they found out about SMWX. Then we're going to get into what is said to be a lit conversation about what's happening around us in our country. So let's kick it off. Dyke.
Sweet. My name is Dyke, and how I heard about SMWX, I gotta tell you, SMWX has been a tongue twister for me for a very long time. I had to practice that to get that right. Very proud of myself. So a friend of mine, fellow thinker, fellow comrade, Julie, actually referred me to the show. Okay. She found out about it and she reached out to Tshepo, one of your producers, and Tshepo got in contact with me, asked if I would be keen, and and I was like, yo man, like Robbie, I'm keen. Yeah,
very nice. We're
sweet.
Glad to have you.
Thank you so much.
Tshepo?
Hi everyone, my name is Tshepo Baloyi. I am a political sciences graduate from the University of Pretoria.
Okay.
I heard about SMWX on Instagram, and then from there I decided to subscribe just before the elections.
Nice. So you've been on
I've been loyal.
We appreciate you. We appreciate you. Cool.
Yes. Well, my name is Mpho. I heard about SW.
See what I'm talking about?
Exactly.
SMWX.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yes, I heard about it through a friend, and since then I've been as loyal as I can be.
And
Yes.
you mentioned the Kanya interview as one that
That's
you,
one of the best, man. You outdid
Skakanya.
yourself.
No,
man.
that interview is just the one.
Legendary.
Thanks so much. Thabi.
Hi everyone, my name is
You
Thabi,
don't have
and
to say SMWX if it's
but it's just your initials.
about the channel.
I heard about the channel on Twitter.
Oh, wow.
You actually did it.
I heard about the channel on Twitter, but I've known you for a long time because I interviewed you just before your book came out, and since then I've just been following all your work, and yeah.
So glad to have you. And then
It's
Manosa.
just Manosa.
Hi, Manosa and Thabi. I'm a City Press book critic and a PhD candidate in literature at Wits University. I think I heard of this channel the first week that it came out, and because I'm a news junkie, I knew that I had to follow, and it's really been a great pleasure hearing what you have to say on what's happening in the country.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic to have someone as eminent as you in the media join the subscribers panel. And all of you, bringing your various experiences. So let's get into it. Kanya Cekeshe recently denied bail at the South Gauteng High Court. How are you feeling about this? The floor is open.
Okay, you want to go? You're going to let me run?
Thabi, let's go with Thabi.
Okay.
He's almost been 2 years in December. It's going to be 2 years in December, and it feels a bit excessive. 2 years for public violence and damage to property during a protest is an utter injustice. And the Justice Minister recently tweeted that he may interfere by giving him a presidential pardon or helping him apply for a presidential pardon. And it's very disingenuous because I know other fees must fall activists that are still going through the process of going to courts, being called by police. Lindsay Mastop of BLF even recently was called to the police station over 2016 fees must fall matter. So students continue to be punished in such a way through the law. And so it's very disingenuous for the Justice Minister to say that he's going to interfere.
Well, I think I'm of the view that he must be pardoned. He must be pardoned. because and people must understand that we are not calling for a new law here. The Constitution, Section 82 of the Constitution allows for the president to pardon or to reprieve a criminal record if that crime was done in the interest of society. And I'm saying Kanya Cekeshe is one of the leaders. We should be celebrating people like him, you know, and who stood up and fought people that were lying to us. You must understand that free education was promised since 1994, but it had never come to pass. And now there was a generation that was proud enough and courageous enough to say we were going to stand up and fight for our sisters and ourselves. So I'm saying Kanya Cekeshe should be pardoned. However, we need to call out our minister. If you understand the law, you will understand that he's part of the process. He shouldn't have said that. And what does he mean by we? You know? And why now? And if you can check, all these people that are commenting about it from the ANC are people that want to be relevant with the youth. When they were not relevant, when they were not saying anything when this thing was happening, they should just keep quiet. And if they are ministers, they should behave like ministers. They must understand that they are ministers, and they must make sure that they don't use Twitter for populist sake, you know. So that's what I'm saying.
I see the litness is already beginning with you two.
I
just want to get everyone's view first, so that we can. But don't worry, we've got all day. So but I know Manosa, and then we'll also come to Dyke, you know, because I know that you wanted to speak, and then Tshepo will round off with you, and then the floor is still open. Don't worry, the doors are closed. We can't go anywhere anyway. So. Manosa, what's your view?
Thank you, Sizwe. It's a great shame and it's embarrassing. And I say this because, I was one of the people that was part of the Fees Must Fall, Roads Must Fall. And as many people have argued, and no one can argue against the fact that it was a noble cause and that it has changed the landscape of South African life. Even as a young black person, I think would definitively say that it's through Fees Must Fall, Roads Must Fall that I've had a stronger sense of who I am and how I feel in the country. Therefore, I think it's one of the best things I would say to have happened in South Africa's democratic dispensation. Therefore, what we're seeing is a great shame. However, it's not surprising because, of course, as many people have commented, part of what is happening is to send out a warning right to students and to the larger public to say that if you go against the law, if you protest too much, you'll be punished for it. However, of course, in South Africa, the interesting thing is that this is not for the first time that we see something like this happening. We know that Marikana was also a process of punishing and disciplining people to sort of say that stay where you are, do not ask too many questions, and if you ask too many questions, there'll be consequences. So we are seeing that sort of a thing emerge in South Africa's democratic dispensation, and I think that as young people, we ought to be raising difficult questions about what is happening, lest we set a precedent that our children's children will have to deal with and be punished for.
This panel is the one. I think can you guys just take over SMWX, by the way? Dyke, I know you wanted to comment.
Yeah, man. Just off camera, we were talking about, I was saying that we have a tendency to allow passion to override either logic or fact, or a combination of the two. And I think nobody here can dispute the fact that marginalization is a form of violence. And so when people when they acted out physically, if you systemically oppress me and I respond in kind physically, because I don't have the power to respond systematically, it's understandable. Like, we understand where that's coming from. But if we monitor the court case itself and we listen to how he was underrepresented and he had to get new counsel in, the question that comes to my mind is anybody having a conversation about what he actually did on the ground? is there an actual conversation about what we did on the ground? Because whatever that may be, should it happen again, and in this country it most likely will happen again, what is the limit? What is the legal recourse? Because we don't know how the next person is going to react. We can talk about how, we talk about a presidential pardon. That sounds so grand to me. It's grandiose, it sounds astronomical. For us to have a conversation about a presidential pardon regarding a student who caused malicious damage to property. Yes, of course, the issue is big. The issue of student must fall is big, and it is of national concern. But again, I refer to the question, what exactly is he guilty of? And what is the legal recourse for that which he is guilty of on the ground?
Sure.
That must be a conversation.
Okay.
This is what concerns me about, in general, how we entertain conversation. Again, I was telling the panel here that we have this thing where in politics we know that for as long as you're impassioned, you can captivate. And the same goes for activists, whom naturally are the majority of people. When I say activists, I even speak to fellow panelists here in their academic endeavors and however else they interact with their communities. We tend to have this thing where we are so outraged by the conclusion, we don't focus on the origins.
But that's such a faulty argument on many reasons. In fact, if you were to read Advocate Tembega's book, The Land is Ours, and I would also advise that if you read Edwin Cameron's book, Justice, A Personal Account, what they narrate there is the story of the law in South Africa's history and present. And what they say is it is important that we understand that every time the law is functioning in a society, that it always has a history, and there are always political and social issues that it's trying to deal with. And of course, during apartheid, we know that we had what we call the law, which was under apartheid. But of course, that law was found to be illegitimate precisely because of the fact that it was an apartheid state, delegitimizing black people. And Edwin Cameron makes that argument. Professor Advocate Tembega makes a similar argument in The Land is Ours to sort of say that in post-apartheid South Africa, in as much as we've accepted the constitution as a way in which we'll govern ourselves, sort of govern our lives and social life, but that we should always be critical of the ways in which it's responding to historical matters. And in a way, for me, reading Fees Must Fall and what has happened to Kanya, I can't help but think of it historically, linking it back to the history of black students and their fight for education in South Africa. Therefore, you can't just have a purist version of the law as though it fell out of the sky, whereas the law is always set in history and responding to historical situation. And Kanya, like the rest of us, was involved in the protest to try to respond to a history that we all experience and that most black students still experience in South Africa today. So for you to have this purist view of it is naive to me.
Can I respond?
Okay, you know what? I'm going to come back to you, but we haven't heard from Tshepo yet. So let's, and don't worry, you'll be given a chance to, as I said, the doors are closed. And I think it's also cool, like, we don't all have to agree on everything, you know what I mean? And not all our subscribers will agree on this, so it's nice to have these different viewpoints coming across. But Tshepo, I want to come to you as well because we haven't heard from you yet. What's your view on the situation? Are you gonna break the tie here?
No, their dialogue is very healthy.
It is.
I think I want to start off by saying, black men, you are on your own, literally. I mean, I don't want to play the race card, but it's a little, it's important. I think if Kaya, his name is Kanya. Oh, sorry. If Kanya was not black, do you think he would still be going through all these trials and tribulations that he's going through now? I don't think so, which is very unfair. I mean, he isn't the only one that was involved in the protests. Myself, I was there. My comrade was there. But we were not treated the same way that he's being treated. I think it's because he was seen as a threat to the authorities, and he's a student leader that he's getting all this backlash and all of that. But let's not forget that students are students. They're not criminals. You get people who were accused of rape who are walking around free today, and yet we have a young man, a student, getting jail time for 2 years now. I think it says a lot about our government today, and a lot about the ANC and how they're governing themselves and the ministers as well. I think it's, I feel 50-50 about it, that the Minister of Justice is saying, okay, let's help him get a pardon. Why now? Why now? Why only him? Why doesn't he say, okay, let's help him get a pardon and then the rest as well? So it honestly, it goes both ways.
Yeah.
Thabi, I know you wanted to come in before Dyke wanted to come in, so let me come to you, and then we'll come back to Dyke, and then we'll come back to the discussion.
Okay, I think that from just her point also, at the very base, we need to understand how the ANC functions as a state. It functions in service of white capital. We saw this you spoke about Marikana. It's a historical issue. It happened in Sharpeville. It's a historical issue where the state is used in service of capital, of white capital in this country, of course, because you know that we live in a country where the economy is predominantly owned by white people. So we need to also remember that tertiary institutions are a business, basically. They are funded by capital. They are a capital entity. So while the government does interfere in institutions, they work for capital. And that's why Kaya is being punished to such an extent. And it may not even stop with the presidential pardon. We do know that. Oh, also wanted to add that it is a long, drawn-out process. You can't just say, we're going to help him with an application. Everything's all dandy and good. It's very disingenuous. I find it very disingenuous from the minister. And also, the minister was petitioned while he was still in office, before he was the minister, of course, but he was still in that office of the Justice Office. And he was petitioned by students to help relieve all the students from the charges. And he never responded. So for him to now say that there has been little communication between student leaders on the outside and his office, it's a lie. Exactly. It's a blatant lie. Yeah. It's a blatant lie.
I low-key feel like it's a publicity stunt. Yeah. It's a publicity stunt. They don't, maybe, like I said, it's 50-50. Maybe they mean it, maybe they don't mean it. And Thabi, you're right when you're saying that when the government feels that white monopoly capital is threatened, they want to act. And how else do they act? By punishing black people. This is how they act. By punishing us, by sending us to jail. Exactly. Yeah.
Dyke, and then Mpho, we haven't heard from you too much, so we're going to come back to you after Dyke.
Yeah. To get back to what Manosa was saying, I believe, like in every debate, there needs to be an ability to compartmentalize, right? So if we're having a discussion about whatever the broad issue may be, there's no particular way that we can have an outright discussion about all of it at the same time, right? And so if we've come to the conclusion and we're all in agreement that obviously the struggle for the black child is egregious in this country, it's outrageous and nobody can debate that. At the same time, there's a conversation here to be had about the state of development in itself of our legal system and what its role is in responding to those very historic times versus how they influence our today. So if someone is seen to have caused the law harm, my question is precisely that. If the circumstances seem to be as extenuating as they appear to be here, or just in essence the person has indeed caused the law a setback and the system has to respond. What is the conversation about that? Because yes, we understand that systemically speaking, this particular individual is oppressed, this particular individual is coming from a place of disenfranchisement. Everybody gets that. But there needs to be a conversation about how we ourselves organize against that very same system with an understanding of what the systemic cheats and everything that has to do, like the hacks and the cheats of a system, are something that we need to educate ourselves about. Because for as long as we respond only through means that seem to suggest that, yes, we're an impassioned people and we're outraged by what's happening. But if you have like an intimate and intricate conversation about the functions of the law within itself, suddenly it's very silent.
Okay. Look, I mean, I think the conversation and the debate begun here is a useful one to be having, one that isn't being had in the way that it's being had here in the media, sadly, with particularly the points that Manosa has made, I think have been, brushed under the carpet in many ways. But it's interesting to hear, your pushback from that perspective. Now, Mpho, you were nodding along,
Yes.
but you also think that a presidential pardon is the appropriate thing. Let's round off this part of the conversation on your views.
Well, I am saying it's important, irrespective of how genuine the cause may have been, we need to be a country of law. And we cannot change the law just because we want to change it. Where Kanya Cekeshe's case is, there's nothing we can do. The only door that is left through the Constitution is presidential pardoning, and we need to follow that route. And I also feel like, whilst we're addressing this issue, once these emotions are down, we also need to talk about the issue of violent protests and the destruction of property, whether private or public. It cannot be that we are in a country where in Vuwane and Malamulele people banned schools, but today we're not talking about it because it's close to home, because it's happening to someone that is close to us. We need to address that issue. You can't say you are fighting for free education, then you're banning a library. When you get that free education, which library are you going to use? And so I'm saying, we in South Africa, there's this polarization in our narrative where if you belong in party red, you can't say what party yellow is saying or party blue is saying. What I am saying is, presidential pardoning, Cekeshe, is from where I'm standing, qualifies for it. However, once that is done, we also need to speak to the issues of violent protest, because we see our government does not want to do anything. Dyke just said this thing is going to happen as we speak. There are students in TVET colleges that have not even received their personal allowances. A personal allowance by nature is something that you have to get on a monthly basis. Now, when they rise up and fight, the police will be sent again. So I'm saying we need to talk about this thing. And, there's a 50-50. In Marikana, people were murdered, but there is not even one police that is in jail. Or even a court, but you see this thing, and with us it happens quick, and for a slight moment one wants to believe that this law has eyes. Our law has eyes. It sees who to touch and who not to touch, because there are footages, there's evidence, there's a commission concerning Marikana, but to this day there's no. And the issue of Kanya Cekeshe, we must not shy away from that. A state lawyer. How many of us get state lawyers? How many of our brothers are in jail for stealing shoes in Pep store? How many of them? How many politicians are out on things that are on paper?
Exactly.
Where someone has said you need to prosecute this person. This is what we found against Pravin Gordhan. You need to follow this route, but no, we're still going to courts. No, we can't trust a lawyer. No, we can't listen to people just because someone is wearing a gown. But then when that same law is against us, it's very swift. So I'm saying we need to debate this thing beyond emotions of Kanya Cekeshe. We still need to talk about how we protest. Okay. That's what I think we should talk about at a later stage.
We hear you. Manosa, you wanted to round that off. We haven't even got to former President Zuma yet.
I wanted to say, firstly, I hear what you're saying, but there are many contradictions in your argument. So I think you should not watch out for that, but be careful of that. Because, for instance, I think one of the best people or thinkers in South Africa to have offered a way in which one could think about post-apartheid South Africa is Steve Biko. And it's interesting that even though we talk about him, we do not really talk about, the arguments that he actually made I was struck in rereading I Write What I Like, where he says that if the apartheid government was actually clever, what they would do is that they would give political power to black people, and you maintain the economy in a certain way, and you bring in a few people to sort of benefit from the new government, from the new state, and it looks as though the society has changed. And therefore, when you're talking about how we, of course, you are right, we need to talk about protest and violence and so forth, but from, I'm sure, people that people that study the work of Steve Biko, they would say we're not surprised at all that the protests continue to be violent, precisely because in many people's lives, South Africa continues to be reflective of the past. But of course, if you are now on the other side, it becomes easy. I'm sure in 1996 at the Sharpeville massacre, I'm sure there were white people on the other side saying, why are these people so violent, where you do not understand it? But of course, if you are black, you'd probably be able to understand it because you understand the social and economic situations that people are living under. So it's quite evident to me that South Africa, particularly the black population, is also becoming polarized in the sense that some have gotten in and others are out. And of course, once you're in, it's often difficult to understand what it means to be out. They look like barbarians out there, whereas actually it's history continuing to speak to us.
Okay, look, I want to move on because we've had a healthy debate, and we're not going to get to the bottom of it right here and right now. But former President Zuma is in some ways a similar question, because he's now facing the law, as Kanya Cekeshe is facing the law. His corruption trial, along with French arms company Thales, has been pushed to 2020 now. The application to, secure a permanent stay of prosecution was unsuccessful. I believe there's going to be an appeal there. But we have another question that's about to hit our society, which is, should former president face the law, or should he get a presidential pardon? If you agree with Kanya Cekeshe, why not former President Zuma? I'm just asking. I'm not saying people. So what's your view, firstly, on just former President Zuma? Looks like things are coming to a head with his corruption trial. And then let's also keep this question of the law and the burdens of the law and where it falls in our country.
But I mean, if you follow, Jacob Zuma has already been touted by the courts themselves as, being someone who was complicit in protracting this stagnancy towards him arriving in front of the courts that he, for the longest time, has been saying he would appreciate if he got his turn, right? And so I don't think any of us can disagree that one of the arguments that he made was the fact that it's political machinations that are having him now have to sit and face his corruption charges. I don't understand how that could possibly in any way have anything to do with whether you did what you did or not. I think we have to be conscious of the fact that sometimes your enemy doesn't need to lie on you in order to bring you down. They just have to tell the truth. So to say that it's political, yes, it most likely is. It's your enemies trying to bring you down, but that's not the question. The question is, are you guilty or not?
Look, you were sitting there talking about the Constitution and how it must be respected. But if you do agree, Uti, these attacks are political, then why don't you think about how it affects the law and how it's been applied in this case, particularly because this is an old case and it's been brought back in ways that are very nefarious and just odd. It wouldn't have happened for anybody else. This is like bringing up something that would have happened during apartheid. This arms deal apparently did happen during apartheid, but because of political interference, you can't say that he's getting a fair trial. So in South Africa, we mostly apply positive law. And although positive law doesn't care about political interference or how the charges are brought about, it does care about whether the process is fair. And in Zuma's case, it's clearly not fair.
Tshepo, I want to bring Tshepo in because we haven't heard from her in a bit, and her points were very strong before. So what's your view?
Like the I don't even know what to say. Zuma, like, yeah, no. I do not think he will get prosecuted. I think the law is on his side. I can go as far as say that I think he's captured some people in the gowns. You know, I don't understand why. Honestly, I don't understand why it's been brought back, and even the way it's been shown in the media, it's very wishy-washy. You know, I feel like us as the citizens were being played with. We get hope, okay, it's gonna happen, and then another delay till 2020. So we'll see.
Can I just interfere with facts? There's been a lot of prosecutorial mischief in Zuma's case. There's been a lot of irregularities in the part of the state. So they wanted to remove the judge because at some point they thought that the judge was being too lenient with Zuma. And that in itself is judicial mischief. It's not right. So I don't think that Zuma captured anyone. I think we're in a very different state. We're in a Ramaphosa state. We're in a white monopoly capital era. And it's not as easy for Zuma to navigate this because he's not in control anymore. He's just not.
But then that it means he has been navigating.
Let's bring in Mpho, and then we'll also, I want to get Manosa. Manosa is just waiting for his moment to come in here.
You know, when a sitting president is using state coffers to stall the process, and when key people in key areas are changed depending on what they say or what they perceived
or the mood of the political climate,
you know,
yeah,
and that happens for almost 2 terms. Someone who is a president who is using state's money, who is using the power that is given, that a political power through the constitution. He's got all, you know, his tentacles on all relevant offices. When his time is up, it's now we need to start being holy. No, it's simple. This thing is simple, man. Julius, Jacob Zuma must just go to Mampuru when he's found guilty. Just spend maybe 5 years. We'll talk about presidential pardon after 5 years.
Yeah.
Because when we deal with it that way, it will also deal with all his puppets, people that have been assisting him in the system, you know. We need to imagine how many of our brothers and sisters that have cases that are brought up from 10 years ago, 8 years ago, where we don't have these reports, these media reports to say no, there was a meeting with a judge, where we don't meet with judges. How many of our brothers go straight to jail for things they did even before apartheid, you know? So I am saying, if this is law, let it not have eyes.
Okay, Manosa.
Thank you, Sizwe. I mean, I am obviously of the view that people that are corrupt and so forth should face the law. But I think, you know, the matter raises a bigger question that I've been thinking about and that I think as a society we ought to be thinking about. And that question is, what kinds of morals and ethics govern us as a society? And of course, every time one asks such a question, you ask it from based on the kind of society that you are, the kind of history that you have. What kind of history do we have, and what kind of people should we be and aspire to be? Therefore, what we're seeing with the trial of Jacob Zuma indeed is an indictment in many ways of what post-apartheid South Africa has become. But I do not think at all that it is his problem alone. I think we see it across all political parties. In fact, even in the ruling party, right? It's always been a shock to me, but I suppose it's sort of become accepted by society. But I was shocked to learn a few years ago that someone that is president today had bought buffaloes for how much? Was it 8 million, 18 million? Like, I forgot. I mean, that's irresponsibility if you consider our history and what many people in South Africa are going through. And of course, we know that with the opposition, is it a Leninist, Marxist, Bikoist party, and they are saying that we've been wearing Gucci before, you know, we became this party and we'll continue to wear Gucci. Utter irresponsibility of what people in South Africa are actually facing. And of course, you have another political party that is still debating whether race matters or not in South Africa. So I think what all of these questions should raise for us as citizens, and specifically as young people, is what kind of morale do we want to as we want to govern South Africa and the kind of society that we become. And all of this, of course, has to do with responding to our history, but also responding to the kind of ambition that our constitution has for the country. So do we have the right kinds of leaders that have a deep understanding of what needs to be done and of what the challenges are? I think the Zuma trial and case is exemplary of what happens when a nation has amnesia.
Right, so we've discussed a lot. We've gone from Kanya Cekeshe to former President Jacob Zuma, but of course, AmINext and the question of gender and the gender-based atrocities that have been sweeping across our country seem to have now fallen off the media agenda. You know, we had 2 weeks of passionate headlines and now we've moved on. But this is something that we need to keep a firm focus on. So, you know, to end, where are we on this, and is our society grappling adequately with the scale of the problem of this war on women? Let me begin, Tshepo, with you.
Yeah, it's a very emotional topic for me as a female. I feel that sometimes we need to deal with these issues in the households, like the parents who have sons, you know. You need to start at a young age to rid the mentality of patriarchy, or you own a woman, or, you know, things like that. And so as a female, I was raised in a, you know, I have siblings, I have brothers and sisters. So, you know, it's when we grew up, I was basically socialized that, okay, I need to survive so that men can be comfortable. That's why I'm wearing pants today. And you're okay, where I'm going, yeah, there might be men, and I'm traveling in public transport. So therefore, I've been raised that, okay, wherever you go, you wear pants. You know, don't go out late at night. Things might happen to you. And I think it has a lot to do with society and the role that it plays, social media as well. The way certain situations are portrayed as if it's okay for men to do things and as if they own us, of which they don't. And I think it goes back to the mentality of patriarchy. And so it starts in the beginning, early childhood. Yeah.
Absolutely.
You know, I have two sisters, right? And I think the biggest blessing is probably the fact that they are so incredibly open to discussions of gender-based violence as people who necessarily might not have experienced it physically, but I doubt for a second that there isn't a woman who is the victim of GBV in one way or the other. I was talking to my sisters and I was saying to them that, you know, sometimes like when you're walking, right? You're walking and there's like a female in front of you, like a female person, whether young or old, doesn't really matter. And you know, this has happened to me where I get like, you see how someone starts to get uncomfortable with the fact that you're walking behind them, and it's like broad daylight. And so instances like that, right? So now I think to myself, okay, how do I relieve this person? Because if I start to walk slower, it looks funny. I start to walk faster, it's funny. So I remember this one time, actually, the girl who was walking in front of me, she actually paused. She stopped and pretended to be talking on her phone so I could pass by so she can be certain that she's safe, you know. The fact that conversations like that are not taking place amongst us as men, and it goes back to what's happening like within the community. So the language that we choose to employ, right? When we're having casual conversations, when we're having drinks. The fact that you can just say the B word, you know, and you're just casually talking about a woman, you don't even have an issue with that woman, but you refer to her in a derogatory sense because you've been raised to believe that your position is more relevant. So I feel like there's only so much that women can say about this. And we need to be able, I think as males, to respond in a way that gives them the impression and begins to show tangibly that what is happening to women is a direct result of what is happening to us.
Absolutely.
I think we need to attend to young boys. I think we need to give attention to young boys. We need to start addressing toxic masculinity, hegemonic masculinity, you know. And it needs to, I agree, it needs to start at the most lowest and the unit, which is family, you know. A lot of us grow up in households that do not have fathers, and we've got anger, and some of the issues come there, you know. I think we need to teach our young boys to respect people's opinions, to respect people's private space, to respect people's bodies, and to respect themselves. I think it must not be a political issue. It must go down. Churches must have programs to deal with young boys, fathers and young men. Soccer teams, all of them. Everywhere where there's a man, there's got to be a program that deals with masculinity and how you understand your role as a man. It cannot be that as we speak, if any of the ladies were to say, I need to go to Johannesburg, I can't say no, it's fine, I'll take you there, because I know we are in a space where I could be next or she could be next. She could be the next victim, I could be the next perpetrator. So I'm saying we need to deal with that. We need to make sure that curriculum development, students, learners and students, both at secondary and TVET colleges are doing life orientation. Yeah. We need to inculcate these issues there. Yeah. We need to address them, and we need to make sure that young boys understand that we don't own anyone. And lastly, we need to teach young boys that violence is nothing. And this also, for me, touches on violent protest. You know, we can't. Violence can never be a form of persuasion. You know, we also need to teach them that they need to understand that when your reasoning falls short, you need to retreat and make sure that you better your argument instead of being physical. Because you would find that in many instances, when I'm in a relationship with Tshepo and Tshepo says, no, I no longer want you, then it turns violent. Or when I've spent on Tshepo and with whatever that I came with, and Tshepo is not in the same page. And, you know, so I'm saying we need to start teaching young boys to reason their way out of situation, instead of resorting to violence and toxic masculinity.
I'm going to come to Manosa because I want Thabi to have the last word. Manosa?
Well, it's the 16th of October 2019 update. Men are still trash. But just to add to that, I think one of the greatest developments in South Africa post-1994 has really been the ways in which women are refusing to allow gender issues to be treated as secondary issues. And of course, you know, we know that in South African history, women have always spoken out. But of course, now it's showing itself in different ways. I think that is something that should continue. Women and feminists and their allies should continue to speak out about what has been happening, because that's what it means to be invited to participate in a democracy. Democracy is an awareness of the fact that you live with other people. You're not the only person that is participating. You are in participation with others, and therefore there needs to be dialogue, and that you are one amongst a group of other people. And I think it's great that men are being refused comfort, and I think that should continue as we engage and further our democratic experiment.
Thabi, we end with you.
In case you didn't hear, men are still trash.
I'm going to be in trouble.
I write a lot about gender-based violence, especially in like the political sphere. But I remember one time I wrote an article for the Huffington Post about violence in the EFF, and I read it to my mom, and she didn't understand a lot of the words I was saying. She didn't understand what I meant by patriarchy. She didn't understand what I meant by intersectionality. And my mom loves to read, so it's indicative of a problem in society where the conversation is here at the top. It's an intellectual conversation. But I agree with a lot of what you guys are saying, Guti. At a grassroots level, we need to go back to the ground and break down what patriarchy is and break down what intersectionality is. And I just want to say, Uti, it's not as simple as patriarchy is the problem or masculinity is the problem. Intersectionality teaches us that it's economic issues as well. It's historical oppressions as well. It's conditioning, it's doctrines of the past as well. It's a lot that is indoctrined into the black community, where we are pitted against each other as black people, and where women are seen, where black men adopt a white man's mentality that women are seen as the lesser. So I think it's very important to go back to the ground and start at roots level and write simpler opinion pieces and talk simpler, but also talk about intersectionality. Recently, yesterday, in fact, a woman was almost violated at UKZN. I'm not sure if you guys have heard, but she was almost violated while she was taking a shower because they have unisex bathrooms. Now, we know that a woman can go to a post office and be raped and murdered, but the unisex bathrooms were a secondary answer to a primary question. So it was a liberal answer to men and women cannot share spaces like that as of yet, before we fix the very primary issues. I'm till this day, I will not go into a unisex bathroom because I'm not sure if I'm going to come out.
Sure.
So I think we do need to have greater conversations about intersectionality and what we understand by the contradictions in the black community and how to go forward. And I think black men need to stop rejecting intersectionality, because every time we talk about gender-based violence with my comrades, they're like, you're deflecting, you know. I'm not deflecting. If this thing was not happening, then I would not need to talk about it now, would I? So, yeah, that's where I'd like to end off.
Well, I just want to thank all of you for a brilliant discussion. Thank you so much for your insights, your views, and for the debates. It's wonderful to have you as SMWX subscribers. I hope the pictures that you got will upgrade your Instagrams and WhatsApp profile pictures, you know. And thanks so much for being on the first ever subscribers panel.
Thank you.
I think
Thank you.
we should end with an Ayeye, right?
Ayeye! Ayeye!
Thanks for watching the content. Like, share, and subscribe on all platforms. smwx.co.za to join the WhatsApp channel. And let's build a new conversation for a new generation. Ayeye.